Welcome to Kelly and Company. It's a Monday. We're getting another week started on the program, and on today's program, Dr. Danielle Jongkind tells us about a behavioral scientist who published a research article about a hawk that had learned to adapt to city life. Very well, as a matter of fact. Kind of like the Beverly Hillbillies. Well, okay, maybe better than they did. Also, you can easily make a lot of your favorite meals healthier by making some small modifications to those recipes that you might have, or some of the methods that you use. Let's talk health hacks for the kitchen with our nutritionist Julia Karantjas shortly. And we'll learn how AI is becoming part of our everyday life at home, work, and play with tech expert Michael Babcock. Folks, even I am using ChatGPT. Surprise, surprise.
This is Kelly and Company.
Thanks for being with us, folks. Kelly MacDonald here. We always appreciate your time wherever and however you consume the show, whether it's up on YouTube, through AMI Audio, or, of course, the podcast, which brings me to an announcement. I mentioned this on Twitter, asking people to gather for the show today. It's June 2nd, and we need to let you know that Kelly and Company will be coming to a close on June 27th. Our 8.5-year run will end on that date. Different reasons, folks. Taking resources from the program and allocating them elsewhere. Obviously, the media market is very different, and the wants out there are very different. So we're reacting to that at AMI Audio, and of course, the financial tightness that right now we're feeling like so many other broadcasters. And to bring this show to you, it costs us a reasonable amount of money. And we'd like to reallocate that money elsewhere and see what we can do for now. Obviously, all of us associated with the show, from the folks behind the scenes to all of us on air and the amazing contributors we've had over that 8.5 years, we feel very sad. I think a lot of us knew that the show was coming to its end, even when we launched back out here on YouTube and continued the show since last October. We haven't had a lot of time to get a lot of gravity on YouTube, but we know that all of you who check out the podcast, we really appreciate it. We really know you're out there, and we thank you. Please, between now and the end of the month, email us with any comments that you might have, words, fond memories of the show, or laughs. We love to laugh here. If you want to leave an audio message, call us at 1-866-509-4545, the normal number, and it'll get passed on to us for sure. We'd love to have audio, whether you include it in an email attachment or something like that if we can use. We'd love to be able to do that. The idea we have right now, folks, is we'd like to celebrate the live show era as we come to an end. And again, our show right now is not really live. It's live to tape. But the reality is it's coming to an end in the format that most of us were used to and has. So we'd like to celebrate it. So we're going to have some of the folks on from Live from Studio 5, now with Dave Brown, people who have produced stuff throughout the last 15 years at AMI Audio with some of our special programming. We want to celebrate it. We want to have a really great feel. And of course, as we get closer to the 27th, we'll bring back some of the people from our show. We'll have a lot of memory conversations over the next few weeks as we walk ourselves through it. Also, remember, you can follow me over on X at AMI Kelly Mac. I'll always keep up the conversation with you as we move forward and when the show concludes. And again, of course, a huge thank you to everybody. But a little early, we'll get into more of that as the month goes on and as we bring some special guests to the program. Our veterinarian has talked about lots of scientific research on the program over that 8.5 years for sure. And we know that our animal friends are often quite amazing. I've had to learn that, and I sit back in awe all the time. We know that they continue to surprise us with their abilities, intelligence, and ingenuity. Well, Dr. Danielle came across an amazing report in a behavioral science publication about an urban hawk that was showing some astounding abilities for adapting to life in the city. She's going to tell us all about it today on the program. Danielle, thank you for being with us as usual.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
So this sounds really interesting. Sounds fun. I made the joke at the beginning of the show about the Beverly Hillbillies because we know those mountain folks, they had to adapt, and that's where we may find these creatures that we're talking about today. What kind of bird are we talking about? Where was he found?
Well, I really have to admire the researcher who published this case study. I think his name was Vladimir Dene. I'm not sure
Hmm.
if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he published this paper. And after reading his article in the journal Frontiers of Ethology, I have no idea how he ever noticed this bird performing these behaviors in the first place. Like he must be really, really observant. But still, this researcher began to observe a juvenile Cooper's hawk in the town of West Orange, New Jersey, having success in using traffic patterns to assist it with hunting. And I was reading this whole story, and I found it's actually pretty incredible. And I was like, we should talk about this. Like, I think everybody would love to hear this story. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. Especially, well, again, when you think about do creatures notice? I mean, we always think about when you see roadkill. Unfortunately, it happens. Do some creatures, like you don't see your roads littered with all these creatures, so you always wonder, I wonder how many of them kind of know. All right, I have to wait, or those things flying by, they're so dangerous to me, and stuff like, and how they learn, especially young ones. So really fascinating. Let's hear the story.
So, I have to admit that I know that animals are, pretty smart, especially animals that hunt, They have to be able to outwit their prey. But the story of this hawk's behavior totally blew me away. So, this researcher actually observed the area this hawk was hunting in and noticed a few things. So, first of all, there was a busy road that crossed a quieter residential street at right angles, so forming a traffic intersection. And they also noticed that there was a house on that quieter road that was fairly close to the intersection. And the people who lived in the house would often eat outside on their front lawn at night. So they would leave behind a bunch of crumbs, like on the patio and in the grass and stuff. So those crumbs attracted flocks of small birds, okay, who would come and they would be like, oh, crumbs, a seagull kind of thing.
It's a party.
Come yeah, it's a crumb party. But they would come and clean them up in the morning. And so, of course, it was these little birds that this hungry hawk noticed, but he had a bit of a problem. So, of course, little birds are always on the lookout for bigger birds that might eat them. So, as soon as they spot them, they all go, ah, bird, and they all fly off, right? So the hawk really needed a way to sneak up on this flock of little birds when they were eating the crumbs so he could catch them, because otherwise he'd have very little
You'd
chance of catching
starve.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and here's where traffic patterns come into play. So, sometimes, someone would need to cross the street at the intersection and they would hit the pedestrian crossing button at the light. And this caused three things to happen. So, the first thing that would happen is the crosswalk would start to emit that audible pinging sound.
Right. For our
Um,
crossings, the audible for those of us who need it for blind people crossing.
Exactly. And then
Hmm.
the cars would stop for longer because the light was set to stay red longer when someone was crossing. Okay. And then the cars would start to line up along this quieter residential street while they waited for the light to change. Because, of course, when the red is set for longer, more cars tend to pull up to the stop sign and have to wait. So the researcher actually noticed that I can't believe this. This hawk would land in a tree well down on the residential street when the crosswalk started pinging, so the hawk could hear the sound. And as soon as the line of cars was long enough to shield him from the view of the birds in front of the house, he would fly down just above the sidewalk, make a 90-degree turn in between two of the stopped cars, and attack the little birds who never saw him coming.
Wow. Oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
yeah.
Holy cow. And that's amazing when you think about he knew about dealing with the cars. He knew about the time. The noise didn't bother him, and it obviously didn't bother the birds. But also, not only that, Danielle, he knew, oh, they'll be out there doing cleanup this morning. Time for breakfast.
So I just like, the pattern that he would have to notice, that the pinging would herald, that the light would be red longer and the cars would start to line up. He knew
Yeah.
to get into the tree before, like as soon as he heard the pinging, because that's where he had to sit where the birds couldn't see him. And then as soon as the cars were long enough to shield him from the birds, he would just, duck in behind them and fly down. And
Wow.
I was just like, wow, that's really,
Wow.
really
Do we know
something.
how long he was doing this? Like, I mean, obviously long enough to be observed.
Well, we're not really sure. The researcher did notice the behavior in November, because I guess they were going through the intersection on their way wherever they were going every day, and started observing and recording his behavior from December of 2021 to March of 2022. And the next winter, they noticed a hawk engaging in the same behavior at the same intersection. But because it was a juvenile the year before, an adult the year after, he couldn't really prove that it was the same one, though
Same
that
bird.
seemed pretty likely. Um, the following summer, they went back to see what was going on, but the sound signals at the crosswalk stopped working for some reason. And the people in the house had stopped eating outside, and they have not seen a hawk in the neighborhood since. So,
Wow.
yeah. So I thought that was like, as soon as like, that situation wasn't set up quite so well anymore, and everything, then okay, well that's it. It was good while it lasted, but
That's a pretty amazing, not just the observations, but the habits, especially when you look at the fact that from one year to another, a bird was, whether the same bird or maybe another, but let's pretend it's the same one, was able to take that break over the winter. Oh, they're not going to be eating outside. It's too cold. I have to find another resource. When you really think about everything going on, all the parts in play, and when the time was to, oh, so you guys are back here. Like, I just imagine this bird through the winter time flying over. I wonder if these guys, and a few times saying they're not here in the mornings. They're not, until finally, well, I guess it's like whatever logic, it's too cold. Whatever logic tells the bird that's enough of that, but shows up in the spring. Oh, good, the buffet's open again.
well, it was actually more of a wintertime thing, because I
Oh,
did some
okay.
I'm reading on Cooper hawks, and
Oh,
apparently they live out kind of in the country, and then some of them come into the city during the winter because, they have trouble finding food, and
yeah,
they do have
yeah.
the little year-round birds. So he would come in the winter and do this, and then go out in the summer and
Ah,
do whatever they do, right? So
okay.
it was pretty neat, but
Because I mean, the
there.
climate there, would they have enough of this food from the people? Like, you'd think that, because I mean, their climate's a little warmer than where we are down there in New Jersey, but when I say that we are this part of Ontario, Canada, it's interesting because I wondered, what those birds are gathering, or if they're gathering just with the family eating their snacks, or somebody goes out and drops something because maybe they go out for a smoke or something like that. Maybe that's enough for them to get the birds to, hey, yay. It's interesting. It's so fascinating.
I thought so, and I mean, this bird is not the only bird that scientists have observed using the urban environment, to help with their survival. Cities are often full of birds, and some of them have been, observed to do other things in the urban environment to their advantage. So I mean,
Yes.
even the little birds that the hawk was hunting had figured out that there were likely to be crumbs they wanted in front of a particular house, and they could come by and take advantage of that every morning, right? I know I mean, it's not an example from a bird, but I know sometimes, if I have a few crumbs on a plate or something, I'll throw it out my side door. And one winter I was watching, and this little mouse had come up and he was, eating the little crumbs off the snow. And I was like, wow, you know,
Wow.
that's pretty smart. But, birds from the corvid family, so this is like crows, ravens, and blue jays, like they're known to be very intelligent, and scientists have actually observed them doing things like dropping snails, mollusks, and all kinds of hard-shelled things like nuts into busy intersections so that the cars will run over them and crack the shells open.
Oh,
Yeah.
like cracking a nut for them, solving that problem, and then there they go. That's incredible. Even their knowledge that, hey, man, I'm eating here, but I got to keep eyes in the back of my head open because of our friends, the hawk and stuff like that. And you wonder, what they learned from that, knowing, hey man, how many birds actually had the thought that, hey man, those things are here. I'm getting out of here, because that's just when that bird comes. I wonder if you could go on and on observing this and learning, and what a paper you could write, as we
Oh,
obviously saw.
amazing stuff. Yeah. And I mean, they've even seen small birds, using moving cars to shelter them from hunting birds before. And I'm sure we've all, known that, birds will circle high above roads, looking for animals that have been killed on the road, or riding those currents of hot air that come off pavement in the summer. I know where I live here in Orangeville area, we have turkey vultures, which are these huge carrion-eating birds that
Yeah.
nest near Orangeville and Mono Cliffs Provincial Park. And I see lots of them circling over top and eating roadkill, you know? And I remember once I even saw a flock of Canada geese use a crosswalk in Mississauga to get
Yes.
themselves and all of their goslings safely across the road. They were grazing in one field and they wanted to cross the road into another. It was actually kind of surreal to watch because I had pulled up to the light, and I was turning left and I had to wait for the light to turn. So the whole flock actually gathered at the corner of the sidewalk with the pedestrians, who looked a little freaked out, to be honest, because some of those geese can be nasty. But
Oh
the car
gosh, yeah.
stopped with the light and the walk signal went up, and the geese just started waddling across the road with the people. And they didn't all quite make it across before the light changed again. But, all of us cars waited until they were off the road. And, the people wandered off to wherever they were going. The geese wandered off into the vacant
To their
lot to
jobs.
forage. Yep, and I think all of us humans were thinking, "Holy cow, did that really just happen?" Like, I
Yeah,
know
yeah. It's pretty amazing. And you know what you wonder is, how many places do these things happen so regularly that the human beings who see it, who observe it, just accept? I've heard of people working at places where there's more wildlife, whether it be skunks, raccoons, and stuff like that at night, people who've had to go from one building to another to do rounds, and the creatures just following them, especially if they think, hey, you're going to drop some food for me. You're going to drop, no bother, no threatening. Hey, man, this is our friend that, leaves a little bit behind for us. And I think we're always so amazed, especially when it comes to geese and navigating traffic and surviving in the city, and so many other creatures having to do the same. I mean, we know that you have your rodents and so on and everything, scavengers taking advantage, but I think birds always just make you think, wow. And like you say, that intelligence level is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah, I read this story, I'm like, "Wow, that totally blew my mind."
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm sure the people living there would probably look and say, oh, there are those birds. There's that hawk again. I'm sure he wasn't too popular, Blake, and suddenly birds fly and feathers fly too from his victim. Wow. Yeah, a
Yeah,
little messy on the lawn too. Yeah.
a little messy. Yeah, there is that.
Danielle, thank you as usual. Wonderful, wonderful story. So much. I appreciate it. That makes you really smile. I mean, it is what it is. It's nature at its best, right? When you talk stalking and hunting your prey, but so true, and so much intelligence.
Yeah, well, it just goes to show you, survival is a thing for wild animals, right? They take whatever strategies they can figure out to do what they need to do. So it's it's often a surprise to us to find out they have this intelligence. And I think, why is it such a surprise to me?
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know?
They've got to survive just like we do. We get pretty ambitious and thoughtful too, and we're kind of hungry, looking for your meal, and they just take what they need. They're just
Yeah.
surviving on what they need, nothing more, nothing less, if possible.
Yep.
Thanks, Danielle.
You're welcome.
Dr. Danielle Jongkind joins us every other Monday for Ask a Vet right here on Kelly and Company. Appreciate the discussion. Boy, what a wonderful story. I got to give a big thanks to the Canadian, the CCB folks, the Canadian Council of the Blind. They gave me at their Vision Health Conference their President's Award. I got a call from Jim Tokus. Jim said to me he'd love me to come to Ottawa. This was for May 27th, last week. And I knew they were having their Vision Health Conference. And I said, oh, okay. He said, we'd like to give you the President's Award. And I said, oh, Jim, man, you dialed the wrong number again. Come on. I was so flattered, ladies and gentlemen. I was speechless. And I know people say, well, what? What did he say? Did I hear that right? I really had nothing to say to him except a huge thank you to him, the board that had decided, to the Canadian Council of the Blind, because it was just so incredible to be hit with that. Last year, I had the opportunity to do a keynote speak at the evening banquet, and this year was presented with the award. And also, I have to give a big shout out to Louise Gillis, who received the Person of the Year award. It was really a wonderful time, and I thank CCB for the award, for the wonderful treatment. It really made me reflect over my years involved with CCB as a member and as a volunteer, because so many of us get involved and try to do things and have over the years to support the chapters. And fedoras off to everybody in any organization like this, because that's what makes the organization run. Whereas I just felt, hey, I was this person who saw the value. But over the last 2 years, I've really thought about what it's given back to me. And I like that. It humbles you. And lest you forget, you don't really want to be doing that at all. You want to always remember. So it was a great conference. I think they have it posted online. The daytime speakers were tremendous, and just the thoughtfulness of them. I appreciate it. It is again such an honor. Nutritionist Julia Karantjas is here with healthy hacks today that improve our meals and snacks in some very easy and convenient ways today. Julia, welcome back. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Oh, I was running around last week quite a bit, very honored and humbled, and of course, settling back for a month on the show that I think nobody will ever forget, as we have so many people, and we'll do some talking with you at some point about your time on the show. But today, what is the most simplest thing we could do when it comes to cooking that will increase that meal's benefit? This is a tremendous conversation.
So the simplest thing you can do is add food. You want to add vegetables. Fruit, if you're, if it's hot out and you don't want to have anything cooked, maybe you're adding fruit, but add fruits and vegetables. I think these, we've talked about this so many times on lots of different topics that we've covered on this podcast. And the vegetables and fruits have so many vitamins and minerals that are so important for our daily functioning and our well-being, as well as fiber, which we know is important for our colon and our energy levels. And we do undereat them more often than not. And so adding them, whether it's dumping some frozen chopped veggies into a soup, a stew, a stir fry, or throwing together a small green salad on the side of your meal. Anytime you can add fruits and vegetables, you're going to increase your fiber and increase that total vitamin and mineral content of that meal. So you don't need to worry about taking anything away, but just add, eat more, get that in. I think that's probably the most simplest thing to do.
And it also fills up. I mean, there are things we often, I'm going to eat this, I'm going to eat that, but that's nice to feel that, that you've been fulfilled, that you're full, you can get away from the table and hopefully not overeat. Where I have the problem is, you left it to me, I'd always have fruit with a meal. I really enjoy my fruit, but you got to have your veggies. You've got to, get what you can from there. I think that's the order, isn't it? Really, if you're going to add that thing, try to go with veggies and then your fruit too, if you want some of that, if you're fine with that. But definitely for that person like me who would, I wonder if I could get away with just having extra fruit all the time. No.
No, but it's good to do. There's actually, I mean, I looked into this a lot, especially with younger, the younger demographic that tends to be more selective with their eating, those picky eaters. And there are some swaps, if you don't like this vegetable and this vegetable, maybe eat this fruit and this fruit to get similar nutrient profile. And so, if you're starting from maybe 2 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, and you really only want to increase with the fruit, and you're getting now a total of 4, that's still a benefit. You don't need to be hard on yourself that you're only eating some fruits. I think that's still a benefit. And, the vegetables will come, just be mindful of it. But that raw or steamed, chopped, lightly cooked, any raw, crunchy nutrient intake is so beneficial for the body.
So if we talk about somebody who's a diabetic, natural sugars, things that, for whatever
Right.
reason, their dietary needs make them have to be aware. Someone maybe who has a iron deficit or something like that. Obviously, you got to think about that. You got to confer with your nutritionist, your
Definitely.
doctor, whatever. So these are conversations. Would this be one of the most common conversations? Because we all have vegetables we just don't like, or fruit that we just don't want
Yeah.
to eat. But the power pack of nutrients and vitamins in them is so important that you've got to find those other ways. Like you just said, if you prefer fruit, you can have more of it, but you've got to have that thinking. Is these the conversations you have the most when it comes to this decision?
Yeah, am I having too much sugar? Am I having it at the right times? Obviously, everybody's blood sugar is different, and the way your body responds to sugars is different. And if you are diabetic, you have the tendency to have elevated blood sugar. So vegetables have less sugar content, which makes them a safer, easier option to jump to. But again, if you don't like them, perhaps it's also talking to your dietitian or your practitioner about combining that sugar with something that stabilizes the blood sugar. So apples with peanut butter or almond butter,
Oh,
or celery with or celery is a vegetable. But if you're having fruit, maybe with a piece of cheese, like something that has a bit of fat and protein, to help decrease that, they call it glycemic index. So the rate at which that food affects your blood sugar or has the ability to elevate the blood sugar. And that's where you'd want to start to dive a little deeper and talk to somebody about fine tuning your diet. But it is something to be mindful of. And the vegetables, we just, you can taste it on your tongue. They just don't have the same sugar content that the fruit does. So it's just not going to affect you the same way. But perhaps it's a matter of combining the different foods that you're eating, like a full fat yogurt. You get fat, you get protein with it. Combine that with your fruit to lessen that sugar spike.
those 12 servings a day that Kelly knows he would never get to of fruit, vegetables. But you bring up the fat, protein, that kind of thing. Yogurt, a little bit magical here. You have some
Yeah.
suggestions how that can play, just like you did, into what we're
Yeah.
talking about.
So another healthy hack that I like to throw out there is think outside the box. So if
Okay.
you've got something mayonnaise is a little more processed than yogurt, for example, and it doesn't have the same nutrient profile. It does have some unhealthy fat in it. It doesn't give us protein at all. But it is this creamy, delicious condiment that we know adds a lot of moisture and flavor to things like sandwiches. And so a possible replacement for that could be Greek yogurt. And so you can use that to moisten and flavor tuna salad, egg salad, these kinds of things that would have a creamy base. But now you're not getting the unhealthy fats of the mayonnaise, you're getting the protein of the Greek yogurt, which is a great swap. It's a great addition. Protein is great for energy levels. It's great for like our muscles, not just to build, but just to maintain mobility, right? We know our muscles support our skeletal system, so protein is important for that. And swapping out those unhealthy fats for a nice complete protein is a really easy way to, health hack that meal.
You really like the Greek yogurt. You find that
I
I could
do.
use that even on a sandwich. I could use that in a salad. So say if you really like it, like yourself, is there any beware? Overdoing it, because I mean, people right now, we overdo mayonnaise and stuff like that in the blink of an eye without even thinking about it. I mean, I have some tuna, I just lay on the Miracle Whip mayonnaise,
Yeah,
whatever I can get my hands on.
me too. I mean, I really don't like dry tuna. Um,
Yeah, no,
so
no,
that's, yeah, I like I like my tuna salad
maybe
moist. So
mustard
I also, yeah, mustard. I've also added
on
vinegar.
tuna.
It's
Yeah,
not,
yeah.
yeah, like a little mayo, and then I cut it with vinegar to add some more moisture and flavor. I don't know if I love it as much, but it's certainly something I play around with. Um, I wouldn't caution, you'd have to see what else you were eating in the day, but I wouldn't worry too much about overeating yogurt as opposed to overeating the mayonnaise.
Right.
And it's that ratio. I mean, fat to protein to carbohydrates. If you're getting a lower fat yogurt that has high protein, it's going to be hard to overeat that fat content for the meal because there's not that much fat there. But with the mayonnaise that's full fat, it's not that it's bad. It's just again, are you having 3 tablespoons of it? And now that fat content of the meal is outweighing the other nutrients. And it's a ratio. It's a ratio thing, right?
Do you
Are you
find you
getting enough protein
use
and carbs?
do you use less of the Greek yogurt? Do you find you do when you're making whatever or using it as a replacement? And I don't want to say replacement because it becomes lifestyle.
Yeah. Do I find use less? I don't think so. I think I use the same because I do like
Okay.
things moist. So I probably use the same amount. It's just nutritionally that tablespoon of Greek yogurt versus that tablespoon of mayonnaise is so different.
Okay.
So I'm probably more liberal with the Greek yogurt because I'm less concerned that I'm overdoing anything, and then I'm more skimpy with my mayo because I know that if I'm not
Right.
careful, I'm going to eat half the jar.
Would you ever mix
Uh,
it? Like, did you start by kind of
yeah,
doing a
I
bit of both just
totally
so that
would
you could
mix
get the
it.
taste?
Oh
Yeah, because
yeah,
I would think that'd be really good. Because, I mean, if you're going with a straight, plain Greek yogurt for someone who says, well, I like my yogurt to have the, strawberries in it or blueberry. Well, you're going to have that with tuna or with, you're probably like,
yeah.
you want that plain
It's a hard
mixed. And
pivot.
if anything, yeah, it is
Yes,
really hard.
yes, yeah. I'll also make it into. I mean, this is getting very creative in the kitchen. I'll throw, salt, pepper, lemon juice, and dill, maybe
Oh,
like
gosh, yeah.
into the yogurt and make it. I'm going to say the word aioli. I'm not really a chef, so I
Yeah.
don't know if that's totally
Yes.
accurate, but make it more of this like creamy, flavorful condiment as opposed to just yogurt. And I've just added, salt, pepper, dill, and a squeeze of lemon. So I didn't doctor it up too much, but I did tweak it so that it doesn't just taste like plain yogurt. It's a little more flavor. You can also add garlic if you like garlic. If you have a garlic press, just stick a clove in there, and that's really flavorful too. It'll
Oh,
give it a big
nice.
punch. So there's lots of ways to doctor the mayo up so that it, or not, sorry, the yogurt up so that it's not just yogurt. Like you said, Kelly, it's not like you're eating a bowl of yogurt and berries, which your palate is maybe what that's used to. You've now kind of disguised it. So maybe it's a little bit nicer in the mouth.
And I think that's
So
what
yeah,
made
but you
Greek
can cut
yogurt
it.
so popular, right? And especially lots of food throughout the world use some form of yogurt, along with meat
Absolutely.
and veggies, and all in their sauces, dressings, or whatever it might be. You mentioned our other friend, the culprit, the salt, and we've said don't make salt a villain. We've discussed that on the pro.
Yeah.
I know for myself, I've enjoyed, instead of adding salt to what my baking, or excuse me, my cooking, garlic powder or something like that, or like you say, squeezing garlic, grinding up some garlic. So what about the other spices we could do this with, and again, maybe outside of the yogurt or other places?
Yes. Okay, good. Another hack. If you need to watch that sodium intake, be mindful of how much sodium you're taking in. You can turn to herbs, either fresh or dried. I'm not great with fresh herbs. I usually buy them, use them once, and then the rest of it goes soggy in my fridge,
Yeah.
and I feel it's kind of a waste, but that's just the way that I, cook in my kitchen. I'm not very good at that. So I tend to gravitate more towards dried herbs, but basil, garlic, parsley, using these seasonings in place of salt, or cut down on the salt and then substitute some of the flavor that you would have normally been getting from that sodium with these other spices, can be a helpful way to decrease the sodium intake. We know we need some sodium, but it is easy to overeat the sodium. And that's when high blood pressure is a big culprit for having too much sodium. That's what you
I think
would feel.
I think that tricky one is stuff like the garlic salt that people think, oh, it's garlic. They see that, forget it's salt,
Right.
when you really should be grabbing the powder, right? If you're going to
Yes.
do the
Yeah.
dry.
And exactly. And there are a lot of options. I mean, even when you buy broth, if you're making soup, you can find a low sodium option and then add your own salt so that you have a little more control over it, as opposed to just being locked into what that broth contains, the seasoning that's already in the package. But you can add a lot of flavor. Like I just mentioned with the yogurt, adding dill and lemon juice adds a lot of flavor that is lovely, and you're not adding salt and you're not adding anything that's potentially unhealthy for you, especially in a large amount. So go ahead and add those seasonings and have some fun, and like you can really add variety to your dishes this way.
I'm not sure, which is silly, that I thought of doing this kind of thing with the Greek yogurt, even though, as I just mentioned, if you have a lot of, for example, Indian food, there's yogurt-based
So much.
seasonings. There's so much in there. There's creams with so many of the vegetables or different meals, and that's what the recipe calls for. And you make up something like that, spices and the yogurt. It's funny how until you sit here and say it that way, you say, buddy, you've done it all the time. You've done this in your life when you've gone to this, kind of food. You, funny enough, Kelly, like it. But to think about mixing it up, at home, I guess so. Yeah. It really makes it really appealing and doable. And like you said, such a simple hack.
Exactly. And for some people, it might cut down on their grocery shopping because maybe now they're not buying as many things because you're just using the same thing. Like, the yogurt, for example, you're using it so many different ways that you don't need to buy as big a jar of mayo, or maybe not any mayo at this particular time, or sour cream, or whatever that condiment is. You're just using the one thing, which is maybe decreasing food waste in your house, and also decreases your grocery shopping. It might make it easier because you're decreasing the amount of things that you have to buy. So that can also be a perk with that particular hack. But,
What a good base to make different things, right? Like you said, to replace sour cream, you have a yogurt base with some garlic and stuff like that to dip your chips in, or something like that. And again, I'm sitting here saying, well, would you do that? Well, I think so. Or something to go along with meat. And again, that's more believable with me and vegetables because of having it at some of the Indian restaurants I've enjoyed meals at.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yogurt, use it as marinades. They use it in sauces. It's, used in hot and cold dishes. It is really versatile. So there's no reason you couldn't also start doing that at home. It would be, it could be really helpful. Cottage cheese too, if you like it. But you can also blend cottage cheese.
Yes, and now that one I think I've probably thought of and never just got around to doing it. That one I could, but I'd probably just sit there and add garlic powder to that sucker, or fresh garlic in there, and just sit back there and eat that just like that, because I enjoy the cottage. And again, one could do that just as much with the yogurt. But if you enjoy it, it really helps. But there's so many different things outside of throwing cottage cheese with something like strawberries in a crepe. There are ways to work it with your meat, your vegetables.
Yeah, I've actually also blended it with garlic and I think salt and pepper, and used it as like an Alfredo sauce.
Oh yeah.
Because I didn't have any protein in the meal that I was cooking. Like I didn't have a meat option, and I just didn't feel like eating meat that day. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I need to have some protein in this meal. So I took cottage cheese, I blended it with garlic and some other stuff, and I turned it into a pasta sauce. And it was delicious. And so, it was great. So I didn't have to buy pasta, like a jar of Alfredo. I just used the stuff that was already in my house. And
Did you get afraid? Did you get afraid wondering, what if I don't like this? I think that's what keeps most of us from doing any of these things.
Yes, because you've wasted it, and then you're kind of out. You're like, what do I eat now? Sure, I've gotten afraid, and I've definitely had a few fails in my
attempts,
adventures, and in my attempts, but I think just don't know unless you try. So I give it a go.
You're right.
Even
making it, just give it a shot, taste it. You think, I don't know if that'll go with my pasta. Well, take a forkful before you go throwing it all over it. If that's the case, give it a shot that way. I think that's always what I've thought, because I've had those brilliant ideas. I'm going to try that. Oh my God, that's terrible. And you just have to learn, sometimes the hard way, sometimes the not so hard way, and just say,
exactly.
No. Yeah. Then you go back to your Miracle Whip or whatever, depending what it is, or your dressing. Julia, wonderful, absolute fantastic hacks and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nutritionist Julia Karantjas will be back with us on the program next Monday. So please settle on back and enjoy. Boy, some really cool hacks there. And I'm a huge fan of Greek yogurt, a huge fan of cottage cheese. I remember when I ate cottage cheese as a kid, my family thought something was wrong with me because they expected me to not like it. But we, at school, did one of those, a teacher brought in a bunch of cheeses to talk about different, places, different types of cheese that are out there, kind of worked in it. I think it was geography class. I think we did it, funny enough. And I remember the cottage cheese and the other kids, ew, I don't like that. And they would hear, it's cottage cheese. And I think at that time, everybody associated it with more of a health conscious choice as it is, as we were just talking about. So, a bunch of kids, I don't want that. No. It was hard enough to sell cheese in general, right? There's no sugar in this. But I remember trying it. I remember going home. I remember telling my family, hey, I'd like this, I need that, and them saying, hey, cottage cheese, you sure you're gonna like that? Oh yeah, that's for sure. So it was kind of a great experiment, as what Julia was saying. I remember getting the, you sure, like, if we're gonna spend money on it, you sure you're gonna like it? Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure. I wanted to give a big thank you for the honor of last week. On May 29th, I was the MC at the Accessibility Awards, and this was a real amazing experience that I got to have in Whitby at the Ability Center. I was invited to come and MC the event, but of course the real stars were the nominees, the people who were recognized for some of their efforts that they do out there for community, for the disabled community. People who have supported. We know the Ability Center owes so much to the late Jim Flaherty. The family there has always kept the Ability Center so close to them and so dear to them. So having a place like this, so accessible facility, is A1. Bill Shackleton, who's no longer with the company, with us in retirement now. Billy actually works out there and loves the place dearly. So when I was asked if I was interested in emceeing their awards ceremony, it was really flattering and really amazing when you heard the amazing things that people are doing. And so many of the people just doing it naturally, just going out there and being who they are. And so many of us benefit from that. So it was pretty tremendous. It was really something else. So I thank them, fedoras off them, for giving me that opportunity to be there, be a part of their National Accessibility Week festivities. And there was so much of that going on out there, and people out getting involved and doing things and bringing such profile. So really great. At the top of the show, I mentioned, folks, for those of you who may be joining us late on AMI Audio, we are now in the last month of Kelly & Company. As of June 27th, the program will wrap up, and we're going to celebrate this month on our way to that and have special guests on the show. Lots of memories. We'd love you to be a part of that in any way you feel you could. You can reach out to me too on X at AMI Kelly Mac. But we intend to have some people back here, some familiar voices, some familiar people from behind the scenes, and not just talking about Kelly & Company, but we want to celebrate the live show era at AMI Audio. So you can email us at kellyco@ami.ca, of course, and you can call us at 1-866-509-4545. We'd love audio, so we can maybe play your message on the air. If we can get some, we'll read your words if you send an email in, and just appreciate your time. That's for sure, folks. Really, when you get that opportunity. Once again, that's the show concluding on June 27th. Michael Babcock uses AI in his everyday work life, and he's not afraid to try some different things, compare notes with what he experiments with, and has really started to adopt this into his life and do things with work and, of course, personal life. So we're going to do some note comparing. Michael, welcome back.
Welcome. I mean, thank you, Kelly. See, I'm welcoming you to your own show. That's how it goes on a Monday morning here.
Yeah, well, you can do that till the 27th, and then you will be welcoming me on your show. Oh, that's awesome.
You read off that number, and I'm like, that brings back so many memories. Calling in and leaving voicemails, and saying the 4545 in my sleep, because I'm like, oh, I need to, because I'd fall asleep listening to Kelly and Co. Early on, because I wanted to stay tuned into everything that was going on, and then I'd wake up and say, I need to call and leave them a message based on that content I heard. So definitely call the 866 number. Love to hear what other people have to say. Thanks,
Me
Kelly.
too. We'd love to get lots of that content too, Michael, from listeners, from people, supporters of the program, even those of you who may have not liked the show or whatever, but definitely for contributors, and just those moments when people have something that comes to mind in the history of our show and live show programming at AMI. AI is always changing, my friend. How are you using it every day?
Well, maybe I'll make AI leave you a voice message and email it into you. We'll see how that goes. Anyways,
Oh, that would be really
so
cool.
I am using several different AIs, but I always keep going back to the original ChatGPT. And ChatGPT, since I started using it and I had to do a little bit of research. Of course, I went and asked ChatGPT, when will
Yeah.
you release? That's a weird question to ask it. But December of 2022 is when I started using it, which was not too
Wow.
long after the news of ChatGPT came out. And I'm going to be honest, when I first went to ChatGPT, because I heard about it on, do you know who Tom Merritt is?
Yeah,
So,
I'm not
so
sure. No.
he used to run a show on what was a direct TV, I think it was, channel here in the US called Tech TV. And
Uh-huh.
he ran a technology show. And now he does a podcast called Daily Tech News Show. And DTNS was talking about the new thing called AI and this chat GPT. And my thoughts were, oh, this is going to be fully inaccessible. I'm not even going to go try it, or I would have tried it a little sooner. And when I logged in, I'm like, oh, this is surprisingly accessible. There were some unlabeled buttons in the beginning, but it worked a lot better than I anticipated it to. And since then, it has grown to know me. It knows what I like. It knows that I don't like the M dashes in my writing. It knows that I don't like to use words like extraordinary or game changing, and it doesn't put that content in my writing because I can talk all day long, and my wife wishes I didn't sometimes, but I can talk all day long. But writing is where my weak point is. I've never really been good at writing. It's not because I don't have the ideas. It's just I struggle, I guess, with the taking what I want to write and forming it into paragraphs that make sense. So what
Yeah,
I'll do
I hear you.
often
I
is
used to
I'll
say thinking too fast, right? You can't keep up with it, and just kind of. I remember in broadcast radio course when I had to write commercials, I could sit there and write a script for a play. I could make up something like that. I could write a story with my poor spelling and everything. Keep in mind, but to think and reduce it down to a 30-second commercial, I really struggled with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Nowadays, kids don't know how easy they have it because they can take all the pertinent ideas and the call to action and everything, drop it into Chat GPT and say, hey, help me craft a 30-second commercial. And as long as you read over it, it's generated that in 25 seconds. So writing assistant is what it has become for me. And that is, especially when it comes to, how do we word this? Diplomatically polite emails. When you get emails that are like, I should not have read that email last night, and or I shouldn't have responded to it. A lot of times I'll take my emails to Chat GPT and say, hey, what tone do you say this is? Or hey, help me craft a reply to this email because here's what I want to say, and it's not polite. And Chat GPT is like, yeah, that is not polite. Here's what you should write.
Well, I've had to, just with the iPhone, I've started dabbling, right? And I mean, in other places that I don't even necessarily stop to think, this is AI doing this. But I'm curious, Michael, before you carry on, over the time you've used it, we talked on the show about it getting to know how Michael does it, where you literally could say, write this in Michael's tone or whatever, especially when we've talked resumes, different things like that. Can you talk to that? Because I'm sure there are lots of people who, I don't want it getting to know me like that.
I mean, I get that you don't want it to get to know you like that, but also if it gets to know you like that, man, it is so helpful.
I would think so.
What I've done in the past is I've taken some of my writings, and again, I'm not the best writer, but I've taken some of my writings and I've just dropped them into ChatGPT and I've said, hey, analyze this and give me a prompt I can share with you, which is a little meta, but that's what I do. Give me a prompt I can share with you that matches this writing style so you know how I respond to things or how I write. And then it generates a prompt. And if you go into your ChatGPT settings, there's some sections where you can tailor the personality of GPT. You can tell it what information you want it to know about you. And you can also give it the details about how you'd like it to write for you as well. So I use ChatGPT to generate a prompt that I can tell it to use, and that way it writes consistently in the same style. Now, every once in a while, especially when I'm working on a couple of projects at once, it'll start using one word I have clearly told it never to use is delve, because delve is always one of those AI. If you see that in writing, my mind goes, oh, I bet AI wrote that. So
Oh
I've
boy.
made it very clear to not use delve. And
Yep.
every once in a while, it'll use other words or other writing styles, and I'll just be like, no, can you rewrite this in my writing style? And then it comes back and
Wow.
gives me the writing in my writing style.
If you don't give it that prompt, it will just come up with a, I guess, properly worded, polite, and using maybe words that you just no, that's not quite what I mean. Is it a good enough partner back and forth like that with all that time you've put into it, or even if you haven't, if it hasn't got to know you, to interact back and forth?
I think it's a good starting point. I think one of the things I struggled with is that blank page or blank file syndrome, where you're sitting there listening to JAWS or VoiceOver say blank, 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 and you're like, where do I start? So even if it doesn't know you, it's a good opportunity to say, hey, here's a writing project that I'm working on. I need your help with getting started with it. And then it can help you with starting that. And then you can build that, whatever that writing project is, based on what you get from GPT. Another thing that's helped a lot is, and it started doing this probably a year and a half ago, and that's memories. So if you tell it, I am now the membership services administrative assistant for the American Council of the Blind, it will remember that. And then when you're talking about your job or you're having it write an email, it'll start inserting that in your signature or in places where it might be appropriate, because it's something it remembered. And in the past, you used to have to say, remember this, but now OpenAI has openly stated, and I suspected this for a little while, that ChatGPT is now remembering things without you having to prompt it. And that is
Right.
happening a lot more on the paid accounts. I pay $20 a month for ChatGPT, and that might influence my experience with GPT as well.
Okay. You want to talk any Copilot?
Well, I'm curious, Kelly, before we move on, how are you using AI?
I think I'm using it more in description, whether it be of a picture. I'm using it to do research now. If I'm looking for something primarily on the phone, if I want to ask something, or if I want to know what would be the nice a way to come up with this, or give me some choices if I'm trying to say this or describe this, names for stuff. If I wanted to figure out a name for something, but give me some creative names associated to this topic.
Yeah, and that's a good way. I use the voice.
Basic.
Well, basic, but it's a good starting point. And again, it's building that knowledge on what it is you like as well. Like it or not, it is building that. So the more you use it, the more useful it'll end up being for you. I'm using the voice section with all of these to just talk back and forth about things. And one of the cool things is because the transcript is so reliable, you can go back and look at in text at the conversation that you had, at least with ChatGPT, and that can help you with brainstorming and thinking things through, like some programming projects I'm working on. So GitHub, or not GitHub, but Copilot. There's a lot of Copilots. One of them is related to GitHub, which is a programming tool, but Copilot for Microsoft 365. I'm using it a bit at work, and it helps me rewrite things in Microsoft Word on a regular basis. Honestly, it doesn't know my writing style as well as ChatGPT does. And that's very evident when it's creating content for me. And I don't know that you can build that rapport with Copilot. I wish I could just, and maybe I can, maybe I should try this. Tell ChatGPT, hey, I'm using Copilot now. Can you tell Copilot how I like responses?
Wow, yeah.
That's it's totally different, night and day compared to what I want. But what I am using Copilot for at work is analyzing Excel spreadsheets. If I give it a report that I've built with 7 pages, because we manage 7 Zoom accounts at work, with probably about 40 Zoom meetings over all of the accounts, I can say, hey, can you analyze this spreadsheet and help me generate a report that tells me how many minutes we spent in each Zoom account? And that used to take forever, but now with Copilot, you can just tell it to do that and it does it. And for the most part, it's pretty accurate because it's just working on the data you're providing it.
That's tremendous.
And I have a love-hate relationship with the interface, honestly, because the interface is not the cleanest, but it can be done. I always want to fall back to ChatGPT.
Wow. Michael, fantastic. Always. I know there's so much to be said on it. We'll pick up the ball later.
Of course. Have a great rest of your couple of minutes.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Michael Babcock joining us on the program, and Michael joins us 2 Mondays on the program to talk a little more tech with us, as he does right here on Kelly & Company, and has for quite a while with the program. On tomorrow's program, film critic Michael McNeely is going to be with us. He's going to be reviewing 2 British TV shows featuring the deaf community, Code of Silence, and the other show is Code of Silence and Reunion. And he'll be letting us know his thoughts about both of them. Also on the program, host of AMI's Parasport Nation, Alex Smythe. He's going to join us with a breakdown on a sport that they're covering on the program. So we look forward to these conversations. And remember, Parasport does join us at the bottom of the hour in the other half of our program on Tuesdays and Fridays. Lots of great conversations ahead. I'm waving at you, folks. Take care of yourself.
Thanks for tuning in to Kelly & Company. Follow us on all social media, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more.